I'm Chris Farrell, and this is On Watch. Welcome to On Watch, everybody, the Judicial Watch podcast, where we go behind the headlines to cover news and information that the mainstream media would rather you really not know about, where we try to recover some lost history, and we try to explain the inexplicable. Today, I've got some great help in doing those two missions of, actually three missions, of covering things that people don't want you to know about, giving some historical context to things, and trying to explain stuff that just seems completely out of whack. And to join me today, I'm very pleased to welcome Peter McIlvenna. Welcome, Peter.
Chris, it's wonderful to be with you. Thank you so much for the invite. I wish it was on better news than it currently is, but hey, it's good to join you.
And for our viewers and listeners, Peter McIlvenna is the founder and host of the Hearts of Oak podcast. You need to go out and subscribe to that and listen to all their excellent shows. A great, really breadth of guests on the show talking about all kinds of different topics. So I recommend Hearts of Oak to you heartily. But also another interesting facet to Peter's background is that he's chief of staff to Lord Pearson of Rannoch in the House of Lords. So you've got a very important political position as well. And I think that brings an extra kind of level or angle of perspective to the topics we're going to talk about today. The reason we invited you on, we've talked on other occasions and personally, but the connection today really is based upon, I think, Americans have an awareness to some degree or another of some civil unrest in England, that there's some rioting, that it may or may not be immigration related, that there may or may not be restrictions on free speech and freedom of assembly. I know what got a lot of Americans' attention was when a police commissioner threatened to go after Americans who made social media posts or comments about what was going on in the UK. So what I'd really like to do from your perspective is let's start with a blank sheet of paper and give our viewers and listeners an idea of, what was the ignition point, what was the kickoff, and where we are now, and where the UK is with regard to this crisis.
Well, this all kicked off 3.5 weeks ago or so. It fits into the situation of the UK after 14 years of a so-called Conservative government. We're Conservative in name only. We have a far-left government. So we have Labour, a socialist government in charge, more socialist than the Conservatives were. Let's just put it like that. And they won the biggest majority of any Labour government for 100 years, and the Conservatives had the biggest electoral defeat any time within just over 100 years. So we are in new territory. They've got a majority. We have 650 in the House of Commons. 400 of those are Labour MPs. 420 could be actually. So they've got a majority, huge majority.
A super majority.
They can do what they like. That's what it means. They can do what they like. And right. You understand exactly what that means on Capitol Hill. When one side has the majority, they can push through whatever they want. The bigger the majority, the more ability they have to put forward their measures. So that's where we fit into in the UK. Mass immigration, the whole gender issue on steroids, hatred of churches, pro-abortion in every way, etc., etc., etc. You get the picture. It's Joe Biden that we have here, Sleepy Joe in the UK. So into that mix, Keir Starmer, who's the new Prime Minister. It's difficult for me to even say those words, but Keir Starmer is the British Prime Minister and will be for the next probably nearly 5 years. He had a honeymoon period, of course, and then there were 3 girls stabbed to death at a Taylor Swift themed concert in their school. up in Stockport, up in Liverpool, the northwest of England. And someone went in with a knife, murdered 3 girls, 6, 8, and 9, and severely injured 5 other people. 12 others were partially injured. Awful situation. So this was reported. The information came out.
Was the stabber apprehended?
The stabber was apprehended and he is locked up, which is all part of the story and how it fits into our judicial system and how we have a 2-tier judicial system, exactly as you have there.
It sounds very familiar.
When I'm on any US show, Chris, it's what we are facing here mirrors the struggles and issues that you're facing in the US and mirrors the issues that we're having all across Europe, which is an attack on free speech and global surveillance. Those two are the pressures that we all are facing. This is a global threat. So the story I will tell in the UK is just an example of what is happening with one country, but the playbook the government have used in the UK can be rolled out anywhere else. And that is the frightening thing through our contacts with the Five Eyes. So, but this stabbing happened on the Monday, initially because it was covered up, of course, because it wasn't a extremist conservative right, far right, because it wasn't the narrative that our media want, that they hid it and they didn't put any information out. So social media went into overdrive and the rumor went online that this is a immigrant that's just arrived in the country, Muslim immigrant, just arrived. This is the problem with migration. So that feeds into natural concern of mass immigration and the damage it's doing to the country. And from that, we then had many people going up to this area, up in the northwest England, to stand in solidarity with that community. Whenever the information came out, this could be an illegal immigrant that just came over in a boat last week. Suddenly, that riles people and that anger goes into violence, and we see riots for about a week, shops looted, smashed up, the kind of BLM type of thing that we have seen Antifa fueled. But this was ordinary individuals that felt they'd been left behind and ignored. So you had the riots happening, you had the police clamp down on that in a way that I've never, ever, ever seen before in all my time in politics and media. And with that clamp down, we have our 2-tier judicial system and 2-tier legal system working hand in hand with our media, working hand in hand with the narrative. And we are now at 3.5 weeks after that event, and there's massive confusion in the UK where freedom of speech lies, what you cannot say. And as I said before we went live, the English expression is they've moved the goalpost. So you don't know now where what you're doing is correct. It's impossible to actually operate within the law because what is the law? And we've seen terrorism legislation used in terms of this. So that is the framework that we find ourselves in the UK, that anger, and a lot of people, a lot of communities are so angry that their voice on mass immigration, the changes they have seen in their communities, has been completely ignored. And instead of hearing what they say, they're simply called racists for having that concern on mass immigration.
So, just for points of clarity, was the stabber a recent immigrant to the UK?
He was not. We find out that the stabber was born in the UK from Rwandan parents. So they may have been fully integrated. Again, the problem isn't necessarily people coming for a boat. The problem is integration. And we have a ghettoized community, certainly in London, in Birmingham, in Liverpool. Yep. It's ghettoized communities. It's not integration. So the information came out, we are told. Again, we mistrust mainstream media. Right. We all mistrust it.
For good reason, yeah.
But we are told that no, this was someone who was born here. Name is Axel, and the surname is a long name. That's been released. He's I think 17-year-old. He has now been held and for a trial coming up, which will be middle of January, which shows it's interesting because you can have a 5-month gap between someone being arrested and charged, and yet we are seeing people thrown in jail within 48 hours because they are termed as far right and against immigration. So it is a two-tier system.
I'm curious about the protests and the people. So there's a sort of organic, spontaneous movement of people up to the Northwest, outside of Liverpool, to this community to protest. In the United States, we're very familiar with, and we've experienced far left organizations, Antifa, BLM, who are very well organized and subsidized for their activities. And so these hard left militant activists burn down cities like Minneapolis. But the crowds responding to this crisis, this murder of these 3 little girls, this crowd is not, what's your estimate? It's not an organized group. It is an organized group. Some organized, some not. What's the makeup of the grouping?
It is organic. It is not groups behind it. It is pure anger and frustration and boiling over. And again, I have not experienced this before, this anger coming, because it's normally a shrug of the shoulders. It's like the French, that's what we have in the UK. Yeah. And it takes a while to be pushed. But the British people have been pushed. But it's a fine line, because none of us will condone violence. Absolutely not. That is wrong, and that is not the way to go. Yet, I understand the anger and frustration and the left behind feeling that these communities feel, that doesn't matter how they vote, they still get the same type of issue. And
right.
We've had immigration going up, to give you a understanding. It's at a different scale than the US, I get that. But for the UK, we've gone from immigration levels 40,000 a year to now 900,000 a year. That's gone up from the 80s and 90s. It was in the mid-hundreds, so 40,000. Tony Blair came in 1997. Suddenly, we have a ramp up where we're now at around 900,000. So you've got an increase of 20 times. That's going to annoy communities, especially when, we have no money left.
Sure.
No one has any money left.
Right.
So where's the infrastructure, the hospitals, the schools, the transport? Where is that going to go? And why are these people, we've just spent 6.3 billion over the last year on immigration. The budget was 350 million. We've spent over 6 billion. So it's utterly out of control. No one's budgeted for this, and no one knows what's happening. And why people come to the UK is because they arrive and they get accommodation. We have had so many hotels taken over by the Home Office, by the government, to house people who've just come in.
Right.
Yet we have veterans on the street, homeless, and no support for them. So it is a two-tier approach to looking after those in society that need it. And instead of sending these individuals back within 48 hours, which we really should do, they're given accommodation, they're given a card with money on it, and they're given benefits. And that, of course, Chris, angers anyone that's paid into the tax system all their lives, and they're struggling. Well, someone arrives yesterday and they get it all. Well,
and as you very well know, there's a 1-for-1 match parallel in the United States with our own. I mean, it's virtually identical. Obviously, the scale's different, but it's an identical mentality and entitlement attitude. So crowds of people head to the Northwest. These protests at some point turn violent. All that does is destroy the poor property owners and business owners in those communities who suddenly have their store windows broken. There's always a criminal element in there who's looking to take advantage of the situation. But my gut feeling is, and I'm sure you're going to confirm this, the vast majority of the protesters are just ordinary citizens who are frustrated, who feel there's no accountability, that they've been left behind. A very famous author named Amity Shlaes here in the United States wrote a very good book called The Forgotten Man, which is exactly that. People who are left behind. They had worked their whole lives, poured their lifeblood into something, and they just somehow they seem like they've been passed by. A lot of frustration. So those folks, are they being mass arrested? Are they being swept up by the police and arrested for just standing on a street corner? What's going on?
So it's all different. We've had, I think, 1,200 people so far arrested. We've had 700 people jailed with jail sentences ranging from 3 months to 3.5 years. Some of those people have been arrested and jailed for violent disorder, which is correct. That's how the law should work in a normal society. And that is the justice system actually working out as it should. In the middle, you've got people who were at these demos but were not participating in violence. In fact, we've had people arrested and charged for basically walking past, bystanders, not actually part of that, simply walking past, and the police catch them and have arrested them and charged them and sentenced them. We have people who have been sentenced for, someone was sentenced for just under 2 years for throwing a tin of beer at a police officer. Another person was arrested for 2 years for shouting at a police officer. Another person arrested for 2 years for exposing himself. Now, this is like, you think Braveheart, you think I'd have lifted up the kilt of Mel Gibson. That's kind of the feeling it's that anger and kind of two fingers up to you.
Yeah.
He was arrested for 20 months. Someone else was arrested for gesticulating. So waving your arms around at the police too much. I think that was a 22 or 24-month sentence. So we've got that. So yeah, that side. And then you've got the online side. You've got people who have been arrested for reposting. And you alluded to this at the beginning. This is the concern that many Americans will feel, and anyone else, that the government have said, we are coming for you. Doesn't matter where you are, we are coming for you. And there was a sinister video of a police officer. Within 1.5 minutes, the officer said 4 times, we are coming for you. That is extremely sinister, and that is where the government they want this fear with the public. Because remember, in the British system, it's policing by consent. It's not policing by force. Very different from the US. Our police officers are not armed. Therefore, it's policing by consent, that agreement with the public. That has evaporated under COVID and is more evaporated under this. And therefore, we're in a very dangerous situation in the UK, where if the police do not have the consent of the public, if there's no respect of the police, then we're going to collapse into something dangerous. So you've got those 3 aspects, the social media one, people being arrested, not for being at anything, but for reposting videos. And thank God that we have Elon Musk. Like him or loathe him, and I've got massive issues with Elon Musk on all the AI, the Neuralink, all of that. Yet, he is the opposition to the British government at the moment. We don't have any opposition. And in Elon Musk, because the British government said Twitter must stop reposting this. What did he do? He doubled and tripled the posts. And I love that bravo attitude that we kind of don't have. I kind of think that's a little bit of Americanism, and I know he's born in South Africa, but that attitude of, come on, I'm going to fight back, I'm going to give you what I want to give you, and I'm not going to shy away. And because of that, he is basically the opposition that we have in the UK. The media are singing the hymn sheet of the government, the judicial system, the police, the courts. They've all fallen out. Even the Church of England have told people that if you're participating or involved in any of this, promoting it, that you are not a Christian. That's what we have from the Church of England. And therefore, Elon Musk comes as the knight in shining armor, and he is the one that's exposing what's happening. That's what's really made the government afraid, because what they fear is free speech. What they fear is the spread of information on these platforms. And of course, that's why the CEO of Telegram, Pavel Durov, has just been arrested in France. So all these things fit together. Nothing happens by itself. And this is just not a UK problem. This is a worldwide attack on all our free speech.
Right. And we've seen it in Brazil as well, right? The circumstances there, Elon Musk said, fine, he pulled out of Brazil. I mean, that's That's not an insignificant chunk of the world or mass of people to turn the lights out on X. So, so what is it? I mean, what is the proximate cause? What is the great sin, this incredible violation of British law, and what is the unspeakable act that people are committing that the government is coming down so hard and heavy on?
It's thinking differently than what you're supposed to. And if you take away the violence, which is incorrect, and you look at the rest of it, the underlying.
Right.
We saw this during the Brexit referendum, whenever the British people actually voted to leave the European Union and free ourselves from the clutches of that institution.
Right.
We had that, and everyone... Look, I remember watching the BBC going and interviewing people in a pub and, what are you doing? Who are you voting for? I'm voting for Brexit. I want to leave the EU. And they were all characterized as thugs, as skinheads, as racist, as extremists.
Knuckle draggers.
Exactly.
Neanderthals, right?
So the story is the same. CNN would do exactly the same of
They're
anyone
doing it
at a
right
MAGA
now.
rally.
It's endless, yeah.
I know. So it's the same playbook that the media are using worldwide, and that works. No one wants to be called a racist. What do you mean I'm a racist? That's awful, horrendous. I don't want to be that. No one wants to be that.
You're a white Christian nationalist, right?
Which is the other one. It's bonkers.
Right.
But it's these, how the media tar people, and no one wants that, and therefore people pull back, they're quiet, and they don't want that, and they worry and they fear. Even, I think it was the Daily Mail 2 days ago, they published a database of everyone who had been arrested and charged in these. Everyone. I mean, they want all these people to lose their jobs. They want these people to really be humiliated and destroyed. Yet we've had, for the last 45 years in the UK, we've had Muslim rape gangs that have preyed on white English girls, with up to 1 million girls affected. And we are in the middle of one of those cases, fighting for justice for one of those girls. And yet there's no databases of the newspapers on that, because that's not the narrative they want to do, but this is. So all we want is a fair media. And this is the reason why organizations like Judicial Watch exist, to actually present the truth and let the public make up their minds. That's all we want. And yet we are given a skewed version of events. But all of this fits under that attack. How dare you think differently? We saw that during COVID. We saw the attacks on individuals for questioning government policy, and we're seeing this attacking individuals for questioning mass immigration, and said, is it the right thing? Let's have a conversation, because we've never had a conversation in the country about mass immigration.
Yeah, and it's not only has there ever been a referendum or plebiscite where the British people were asked, or did you do the same thing as Angela Merkel, and it was a stroke of the pen, and that's just the way it is?
It was. For some crazy reason, the Brits have trusted governments. Now that is fast disappearing. But yeah, it was when Angela Merkel basically said, come everyone. And that opened the floodgates to Europe. That was the beginning. And world leaders see that. And where do the people go? I mean, in Britain, we have a first past the post electoral system. We don't have a PR system. So this is how crazy it is. Whenever UKIP in 2015, the Brexit party, Nigel Farage's party, in 2015, we got, and I worked with them for 5 years, so we got 12.8% of the vote, let's say 13% of the vote. AfD, Alternative for Deutschland, the party on the right in Germany, they got 12.8%, 13%. We got 1 MP, Germany got 96. That shows the system that we have and how it punishes different thinking or small parties. And we have a uni party, just like you have. We have the Conservatives who have opened the doors, let mass immigration, and Labour have now come in. They're going to fast forward that. And anyone who opposes that is a racist and must be targeted. And it'll not just be imprisonment. We have seen people having their bank accounts taken away because of views. And that will be the next step, actually restricting your access to a financial product, which makes it impossible to live in the UK or anywhere in the world.
Yeah, well, we've seen debanking here, of course. And then our mutual cousins to our north, our Canadian friends, have gone completely off the deep end. Trudeau now is proposing all sorts of insane rules and laws, particularly about internet and free speech. So it really is, so I guess it really is up to podcasts like this, other social media, other platforms, for probably a very large percentage of the British public to say, well, where am I going to get my news and information? Where can I freely share my ideas and post my opinion without worrying about there's going to be a knock on the door? I mean, this is it's really an East German mentality.
Oh, it is. It's Stasi control, 100%. And I listened to a podcast, the BBC, the other day. I was driving, and the reporter went to one of these demonstrations and was talking to people. And the reporter was confused because they live in the bubble of the mainstream media, the legacy media, and they were trying to understand this concern of mass immigration, which obviously doesn't affect the reporter because they're protected from that where
they're going
live.
to their London cocktail parties.
Exactly.
They have no idea what's going on in the rest of the country.
Yeah, and they've got their cottage in the country. It doesn't affect them. So they were talking to people, and it was really insightful, that conversation, because twice the reporter said we were talking to people, and one name that is well known in the UK, one of the most high-profile individuals who's been a target of the government for many years, is someone called Tommy Robinson.
Yeah, sure.
He was on Jordan Peterson interview recently. I've seen him with God's had so many, but Tommy was quoted in this, and they said, we were talking to people and they just said, we like this man, Tommy Robinson. He talks our language. He talks about issues that we are concerned about. And why aren't you talking about that to the BBC? And the BBC were quite shocked about this. What do you mean? We are the arbiters of truth. What do you mean we don't know?
Right.
And it was a fascinating exchange with the BBC reporter not understanding, a failure to grasp the anger and concern these people have. And that's the gap that we have. And you're right, it is alternative media getting their sources. And they had conversation with people, and they said, all these people are getting their information from influencers online.
Right.
And that is how we sidestep those controls, using the medium we have. And of course, Twitter is one of those, using websites that are up there at the moment, and every other resource available. And you realize that content creators online are resourceful. And as I'm sure Judicial Watch, you're looking at ways of getting the message out, amplifying that message. And that happens time and time again as a catch up by the government. And that's why the attack on Telegram, because Telegram is one of only 2 encrypted services, the other one being WhatsApp.
Right.
Signal is more open source. But all of that has been because Pavel is obviously based in Dubai, away from government control. And that arrest in France, that wasn't just the French government acting by themselves. No, that would have been all the Five Eyes. That would have been Sleepy Joe working with Trudeau, working with Australia and New Zealand together with NATO, because this again is about the issue of Ukraine, Russia,
right,
and Telegram being used to spread information that the government cannot control. And that's what they are so afraid of. Gone are the days where you would buy your newspaper and read it over a coffee, or turn on whatever, CNN or CNBC, and actually watch that for information. People are getting their information elsewhere, and this is what the government fear. And that's why the rest with Pavel, and we're seeing across every network the attacks, the denial of service, the restrictions of travel, and the government are afraid of these platforms and high-profile individuals spreading the message. But you realize when you talk to people, actually that's where they're getting their information. And I'm always pleasantly surprised talking to friends who I think maybe aren't necessarily in this battle, don't understand all the issues, but they tell me, hey, did you see that interview by Tucker? He was talking to so-and-so, or this Alex Jones, I like her, or whatever it is. I think people are getting it. The information is getting out, and that is so important.
Yeah, there's and people, they now appreciate and understand, I think, that the legacy media outlets all the big names that people, their parents and grandparents relied upon. There's really a sneering condescension from them towards, what they view as the great unwashed masses, right? Those people, in America, it would be the flyover country. They're not in Los Angeles and they're not in New York, so who gives a damn? They're just these country bumpkins who do as you're told, shut up and pay your taxes. And that largely is, that's how they view them. And it leaks out every once in a while. You'll see in an interview where somebody raises some point and the moderator or the talking head from one of these channels, looks terribly offended that somebody sort of smiled at him and told him to go to hell, Yeah. Or the other thing that's interesting is, this entire new industry of self-appointed fact checkers, right? Everyone's a fact checker, and absolutely phony, compromised, lying operations like, Snopes or PolitiFact. I mean, they're certified liars, and but all kinds of well-meaning morons go, oh, well, I saw an article and they said that wasn't true. Yeah, okay, But it's an education process. It's incumbent upon us, each in our own way, to educate and inform, encourage, inspire people that they don't have to just, choke down the garbage and believe everything that's being fed to them.
It is, and actually we're seeing to actually give a very positive note. Obviously, the US, you all need to do your duty and make sure on the 5th November you don't have cackling Kamala in charge. You do all you can do to make sure President Trump is. It's that laugh is just, it goes through my head. But across Europe, actually, things are happening. So in the UK, maybe less so. But actually, that's why Marine Le Pen, that's why she did so well in France, because there's anger, and the French parties colluded to make sure they would all drop out, to make sure there's only one candidate. Right. That's a denial of the democratic process to the individual. But then we've seen Geert Wilders actually winning in Holland. Right. And Chris, I know you know this because you travel to Europe a lot, and I know the work that you do and how you understand the European situation. But even end of next month, we've got the elections in Austria. And the viewers may think, Austria, it's a tiny country. It is. It's no longer the Austrian-Hungarian Empire. I get that. It is small.
But they wish they were.
They wish they were. Exactly. But actually, the FPO, the Freedom Party, are polling top in Austria.
I know.
They could be the winner in those elections. You have the Swedish Democrats doing exceptionally well up in Sweden. And it goes on and on and on. And of course, in Hungary, Viktor Orban setting up that Patriots group for Europe, and that's going to be a phenomenal grouping within the European Parliament. So although we have the massive frustration and clampdown on free speech, actually politically there are a lot of bright lights happening all across Europe. So for me, when I look out, it's actually very hopeful. It's not a demoralizing situation at all, but we are seeing pushback through the electoral system, which is what you want, because if that doesn't happen, it's concerning what could happen. So you want to work on the electoral process. That's your bread and butter. That's where you have to win and bring people with you. And we are seeing that move across Europe. So that is exciting. And that's why I think we will have pushback on these restrictions on free speech and the mass surveillance that we're seeing.
What's your impression of how, so Americans only got a snippet of this because our own media does such outrageous censorship. But there were a hell of a lot of farmers all across Europe protesting. You saw those tractor caravans, and you saw them in some instances, moving large amounts of manure in front of various public buildings. But there was also, convoys and blockades, and the media would like you to believe it happened, 2 or 3 times in a couple of outlying areas. But actually, there are any number of European capitals that were really crippled by that. And there was an effort, see, if you don't report it and there's no coverage, well, then it never happened. And your own countryman, George Orwell, was he's spinning in his grave, no doubt. He wrote 1984, as a warning, not as an instruction manual. So, what do you say about the deliberate effort to suppress news?
We haven't been in a time like this before. So one of the difficulties is that we're trying to reassess what that means, and moving away from trusted media sources that provide us with the truth, moving towards the internet of decentralized information, and then moving towards social media where that information can go anywhere, moving towards VPNs existing so you can actually access information even when it's restricted. We are moving into new, interview with someone this morning, we were talking about other technologies available that I wasn't even aware of. So technology will always push forward and will come up with new ways and new avenues of not only sharing information, but also sharing finance, which is another huge restriction because, again, as I mentioned, if your bank gets shut down, then you can't transfer, and there are only maybe 3 world providers of financial transaction bodies that actually you can move through. And if they shut you down, then you're done for. So there are new ways coming up of getting round the government, and whatever the government do, something new will spring up. And I think people are seeing that, and that's why the move to encrypted conversations especially with Telegram and Signal, certainly. And there will be other ways that come from that. And even though they will arrest the leaders of those will flourish. We saw obviously in Mark Zuckerberg and his his tweet, or was it before somebody? I'm so sorry for giving all that information. I'm so sorry, I wouldn't do it again.
He confessed.
Yeah, right. Of course you would. So but that's insightful because there is frustration there, even with a large group like Facebook and WhatsApp, and there is concern of what the government do and don't do and the restrictions they place. So even an organization like that, which we wouldn't trust, yet there is concern within of how a government is clamping down. If Brazil, let's say, shuts down Twitter, let's say Twitter isn't able to operate, it operates everywhere else, and there will be a way around. And governments are not going to be able to shut down that large source of information, because if they do, it will come back to bite them, and the public will see those restrictions being put in place, and there will be ways around them. So I whatever the government do, bring it on, because there will be other ways of passing around and passing that information. And look, I know you have COSA, the act coming through in America. We've had the Digital Services Act in Europe. We've had the Online Safety Bill in Britain, which is to restrict information, and anything the government decide is harmful or offensive, they can restrict. And social media companies can be fined a percentage of the revenue. That huge attack that we're seeing, and Europe and the UK worked together to bring 2 bills which were separate but very similar. And we have seen both of those passed. I think 10% of the revenue is the fine in the UK or Europe. Yet there will be pushback, and I think people will not accept that restriction of information in a medium which we all accept as normal. We're not going back to just buying a newspaper and waiting the next day to get the news. It's a 24-hour news cycle, and I think what we have at the moment will push back on that government censorship, because there are people who are very smart in the industry, in the IT industry, in the media industry, that want to get the information out. I think they will stay one step ahead of government.
I have 2 last questions for you. The first one is, what is your prognosis for what is going to go on with this crisis concerning the stabbing of these 3 young girls and all of the sort of ripple effect after that? How is that going to play out and resolve itself? So that's question 1. And then question 2 would be, as we close up, where can people follow you and your work and listen to your podcast and any projects you may have coming up, all that sort of thing? Give me an idea of folks that are interested. How can how can they track what you're up to?
Well, Chris, the first one, the government have done very well. They've used a playbook that we've seen behind the Iron Curtain to shut down dissent. They've gone in hard. They've arrested people. They've publicised that, and that produces fear within people when you don't know who actually your neighbour is and whether they will pass information on about you. And we saw that curtain twitching, kind of neighbours being told, report on your neighbour if they have a cup of tea during COVID restrictions.
Yeah, there's a good German word for that, Zersetzung, right? It's the particularizing, it's the breaking up, the atomizing of persons and communities.
Exactly, and that's what we're seeing. Government don't want cohesion; they want that division. They want to set groups against themselves.
Right.
So the government have used this playbook extremely well. It shut down these demonstrations, but the anger is still there. And our Labour government, our Socialist government, are not going to do anything about restricting immigration. There's no money for house building. There's no money for anything. So they are going to keep letting people in illegally and keep paying them to fight against the British system. People coming in legally, then whenever they are maybe told you must leave, you don't have the documents, they then say, I want to appeal that. So the government pay them so they can appeal against the government. That's how ludicrous the system is. And it's an industry. I'm sure it's the same in the US. It's an industry that fights against government's desire, wherever that may be, to actually bring restrictions on immigration. But the anger is there, and this will keep rising. And I'm praying that we have a political solution, because if there's not a political solution, then the other option is not nice. We don't want to go there. Revolution is never good. People who say revolution, well, do you know what that means? Have you thought of that? Have you looked into history? Maybe you understand the revolutions are bloody and destructive, and they don't really always end well. And I think that enthusiasm for that clash with the government, I understand that. But the end result may not be as pretty and nice as we wish it to be. So, but everyone's on tenterhooks in the UK. Literally, I've had American friends telling me, I was thinking of flying through the UK. I maybe won't at the moment because I'm not sure what the current situation is.
Right.
And my response, if you're high profile, probably don't come for the next month or so. We can chat later. Just as an advisory, you never know, and we don't know what the rules are. So that's where you are in the UK. It's a wait and see where we are.
That's tough if you're a troublemaker, right?
If you're a troublemaker, if your face is up there, maybe stay at home for a little bit and don't come to the UK.
Right. Bar the door.
Exactly. So that's my line on that. For Hearts of Oak, we stream everywhere. We've got Monday night, Thursday night, Saturday night. We've got 2 guest interviews, and 1 news review. And we have Sabin Howard is on.
I know
he's
him.
our latest one.
Yep,
Who's obviously just done the World War I memorial, a soldier's journey. Fantastic guy. I had no idea, and I had such a good conversation with him. Fascinated to hear if that memorial, which is going to be in DC, unveiled on the 13th of September, that was built in the UK.
Forged in Wales.
I know, but I love that connection because that links the countries. And of course, we fought side by side during 2 world wars. And it is lovely to have that symbolism, I think, coming together. But he's our most recent. We stream on Bannon's War Room on Rumble and Getter. But it's 3 p.m. Eastern, Monday, Thursday, and Saturday at Hearts of Oak UK is on Twitter, and heartsofoak.org. You can just watch it directly on the website. So we're up to about 700 interviews, and I've loved connecting with so many people worldwide, because to me it's about not just an interview, but actually it's about relationship. It's about what can we do together? How can we assist each other and help each other in this battle for freedom that we are all facing? And to me, that's what it's all about, those connections, working together, doing what you can do together, what you could not necessarily do separately.
Yeah, it's very important. And, I jokingly say that whenever I interview folks, particularly if I'm interviewing or talking with folks from other countries, they'll say, well, you have to come and visit us, and we'd love to have you. And I say, well, I only want to meet with the troublemakers. Right? I'm not interested in all the official people, and I want to meet with the troublemakers. And because, I mean, largely that's where a lot of the very best things come from, right? And you have to appreciate freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom of ideas, not this supremacist mentality that is being jammed on the public, whether it's in crazy, radical, boutique gender ideology or, attempts to impose Sharia law on Western civilization. There's all sorts of, the root of it all, of course, really is a sort of Marxist ideology with the supremacy of the state, and that the people serve the state, and the consolidation of power, right? That's what it's all about for these people. So anybody fighting that, I'm with them, and that's why I like troublemakers.
We have a lot of those in the UK, thank God, because we need them more than ever.
Listen, Peter, thank you so much for your time. We're very glad that you joined us. Remember, folks, that go to Hearts of Oak for the podcast. Definitely worth your time to subscribe and listen in to all the great interviews. Peter McIlvenna, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, Chris. It's an honor.
I'm Chris Farrell, on Watch.